At this time, I would ask any members of the body to make any disclosures and recusals required under the city's ethics code. Not seeing any. I'll move us on to agenda item number 2, legislative file 78977, amending section 2.05 of the Madison General Ordinances to include identification of agenda items requiring a supermajority vote on the consent agenda documents. I believe I'm turning this over to Attorney Haas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was an amendment amendment of the ordinance, which, as you know, the alders receive a consent agenda document prepared by the council office staff. During the last legislative session, the information on that consent document was trimmed back a bit, and there was an ordinance passed to specifically state what is to be included on that document. And so now it only includes documents where there are speakers registered, or where there is a recommendation that is different from what was on the original agenda, or if there are items that are excluded by alders, as well as items introduced from the floor. This proposed amendment would require that the council office go back to including items that require a supermajority vote on the by the council. Those vote requirements are currently included on the regular agenda. They're not included on the consent agenda document as an item that requires a supermajority. So that's what this ordinance would require.
Thank you for the explanation, Attorney Haas. I was looking to see if any of our sponsoring alders for this resolution joined us. I don't see any. Any questions for Attorney Haas? Or procedural questions? Vice President Figueroa Cole.
I mean, I kind of have questions of the intent of the ordinance and people that put it forward are not here, but Attorney Haas, do you happen to know why, what's the relevance of adding those items to the agenda? I mean, to the consent agenda document?
I think Alder Haley's preference was just that information be included again as it was in the past.
But doing, I mean, I guess I'm struggling understanding the purpose, like why 15 items, not why items that are interest of the public? Why do we select that specific reason to be? That's what yeah.
I would just be speculating, really. I mean,
And then, so for this consent agenda document, is it fair to say that the main purpose of it is to track any changes to the agenda that was published to the public? So then they're aware that changes were made to the agenda?
I think both changes and to indicate which items are going to be discussed separately, excluded from the agenda, from the consent agenda.
So, yeah, and so, yeah, so items that were changed for whatever was published, and then items that are going to be discussed, which then the second, I imagine the second intent there is to give staff the warning that their items on the agenda where their input is required, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you, because I don't really have any questions. I really would like to discuss the intent later. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. And to chime in on there, at least during this current term, I believe there's been 2 instances at council where one of our peers pulled an item for the intent to inform the public that I believe it was a supermajority vote or a vote that had a budgetary impact, and so it was a supermajority. And so I would maybe also speculate that this would be a compromise to make sure that disclosure our peer was wanting the public to know was a part of the consent agenda. Any other questions or discussion? Vice President?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I'm also wondering about that, because I mean, everything on the agenda comes as an introduction, almost everything comes in introduction, and you sitting on that for up to 2 weeks. So I just really still don't see the purpose of bringing that at 10 o'clock at night to just bring clarity to the public when you had 2 weeks to share that information. So again, I'm looking forward to the discussion at council. So I don't know if other people don't have any questions. I guess you need a motion, I suppose.
Yeah, I was going to add on kind of my perspective, at least as the person who currently reads the consent agenda, as well as sits on the Finance Committee, which maybe I should ask a question for clarification, Attorney Haas. Other than finance or budget impacts, what are there other resolutions that could be a supermajority? And if so, how does that determination get made?
Yeah, there are certain other motions that require a supermajority, either motions under Robert's rules or motions that are require a supermajority because of our ordinances. I think the budget is the most common one. Suspending the rules requires 14 votes. Sometimes that happens. There are things, sometimes decisions that would be overturning, I think, a decision of the Plan Commission sometimes requires a supermajority vote. But I think the budget and suspending the rules are probably the most common.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would say that without having maybe the direct context from those who put this forward, I would not be in support based on the fact that, from my experience, obviously, it's not that these would come just, supermajority items would come straight to council and they make their way through BCCs as well. And then also with them, working with council staff on the agenda preparation too. Obviously, it's denoted in the agenda which items are supermajority, and so it's not remiss, or it's not that it's not noticed that it's a supermajority item. So I agree, I would look forward to conversation or discussion at council, but at this point, would not support making the minor change. Seeing no other hands raised or folks in the queue, I would then entertain a motion.
File.
We have a motion from Vice President Figueroa Cole to place on file. I'm assuming your hand is a second, Alder Evers? Yes, I see a nod. So, all right, do I have any objection to, oh my gosh, my words. Assuming unanimous consent to place on file? Seeing and hearing none, the recommended action from CCEC will be to place that on file. And that will move us into agenda item 3, legislative file number 78978, creating subsection 9 of section 2.01 of the MGO to require adjournment of common council meetings at 12 a.m. midnight. Attorney Haas?
So my understanding is that this has been attempted in the past, probably with mixed or results or unsuccessful results. This ordinance would require that the council adjourn at midnight unless the council votes by 2/3 vote or 14 votes to continue the meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions. I think from my understanding, I wasn't here obviously, but I think in the past it was attempted, and I think when the hour reached midnight, the council often decided that there were important items on the agenda and simply decided to continue the meeting. So it's always an option for any alder to make a motion to adjourn in the middle of a meeting, and if the majority votes to adjourn, the council can. This would sort of change the default to adjourning at midnight unless there was a vote to continue.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions? Alder Evers?
I have no questions as the person who's put forth this motion or this change is not here, from what I understand, or not at the meeting. I will not be supporting this, though. I think we have to be prepared as council members. As part of the job, we can always vote to adjourn if we're too tired and not able to concentrate. Sometimes meetings go long. Sometimes the U.S. Congress meets all night. I don't feel it's an appropriate thing for us to place this kind of artificial restraint. I do think it's appropriate for all of us to exercise good judgment and not making meetings last longer than they need to, by being prepared, by asking staff ahead of time, by doing all the little things that, if they're not done, they add up and make our meetings unnecessarily long. That said, sometimes they are indeed necessarily, by nature of the work that we need to get done, long, and we shouldn't shy away from that. That's part of the job. So I will not be supporting any version of this. I would like to move to place it on file.
Second? I mean, there's people on the queue, I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm Alder Evers in the
Got
queue.
myself
Let's
ahead.
get to her first, but
I'm sorry.
thank you, Alder Evers.
Sorry, I just actually had a clarifying question, which is that, like, let's just pretend that this were to pass. What would it do then for all of the agenda items that had not been discussed yet? They would just move to the next meeting? And what would be the impact of that on all of the referrals to other committees, et cetera, et cetera?
Right, so typically they would just be placed on the next agenda. You know, when there's a motion to adjourn made, that's not debatable, except if a member wanted to bring up that issue, that there was an item that required timely action, that can be brought up before the motion to adjourn is voted on. But otherwise, the motion to adjourn is not debatable. But in either case, whether or not this passed, somebody could bring to the floor's attention that there was an item that required timely action. Otherwise, it would be just simply put on the next agenda.
Thank you. I'm not seeing or any hands in chambers or in the queue. We do have a motion on the floor from Alder Evers to place on file,
Second?
seconded by Vice President Figueroa Cole. Any objection to assuming unanimous consent on placing on file? Seeing and hearing none, the recommended action then is to place this on file. Thank you. It'll move us along to agenda item 4, legislative file number 79244, accepting the 2023 agency annual surveillance technology reports for the 2022 calendar year. That is Karen.
Yes, so this is an annual requirement for the agencies to report on whether they've acquired any new surveillance technology or made substantial changes to their surveillance technology per the MGO. This is and it comes to CCEC every year.
All right, thank you. Question, Vice President Figueroa?
Yeah, Karen, do you know how, I mean, I think Isaac kind of explained a little bit how this data is collected. Do they have any kind of spreadsheet where they put the information so we can easily look at, you know, look at changes from this year to next year? Like for the past 2 years, I have reviewed that file and it takes a long time to look through it. So do you know how the information is sent, or do we offer them a place for them to deposit the data for it to be more easier to look at, to digest?
So IT created a SharePoint site for them and a template and a framework for submission. and then they upload their reports to the SharePoint site. That's how they do it.
Is the SharePoint reportable? Can they report from the, can we report from the SharePoint to the specific fields, for example?
That's a good question. I haven't tried it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to figure that out, so we attach to this big document, it's a Excel file or something that we can look at and say, oh, pinpoint to the areas or increases or whatever it is that the ordinance is asking us to look for. Thank you, that's all I got.
Thank you. Any other questions, points of discussion, clarification? Oops. Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain the motion.
Motion to adopt, I think, or accept, I don't know.
To
Looking.
adopt.
To adopt, yeah, motion to adopt.
Second.
Thank you. Safe to assume unanimous consent? Seeing and not hearing any, the recommended action is to adopt. Thank you. We are moving right along. That moves us into agenda item number 5, legislative file 79867, revising Alder Pay Ordinance MGO 3.50. And I believe I'm turning back over to Attorney Haas.
Thank you. Karen asked me to do a PowerPoint for this, and I just did not have time to because I'm backing up 3 attorneys that are out of the office currently. I don't think there's actually a lot to present. The main point is that, as many of you know, changing the salary of the alders or the mayor has to be done by a supermajority vote, 3/4 vote under state statute. So we can't change that rule. That's 15 votes. For those of you who were here last fall, you recall that the council approved additional money in the operating budget, but the council's salaries and the mayoral salaries are set in ordinance. And so there was an ordinance amendment proposed. It got a majority vote, but it did not get 15 votes. So it failed. The other rule under state law is that salaries have to be set before December 1st of the election, and they cannot go into effect until the next term. So any change to the salaries of alders cannot take effect until after the 2025 election and would have to be completed by December 1st of next year. So I think that's the basics, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Vice President Figueroa Cole.
Mike, so reading the ordinance here about that dollar amount that is in there, so if we change this ordinance, then that dollar amount changes and the date of the effective date changes, and then that 2% continues to go? Or is that number changes every year to attach the percentage increase based on the calculated managerial employee thing?
Right, so currently, section 3.50 says effective in 2017, the base amount of $12,692 shall be adjusted by a percentage equal to a calculation of, for managerial employees, and that goes into effect in April every year. So there is an annual adjustment, but it's based on that formula, right? And so the proposal would have increased the current amount, and I think kept that annual adjustment. So I apologize, what was your question, Alden?
So would the $12,692 change for whatever is decided, and then that changed with effective date or whatever date, which will be in the future, I suppose, because,
Right.
right?
Right, there could be an increase that would go into effect in April of 2025. The council could keep the current language then about the annual adjustment as well.
So then another way to read this ordinance is that since 2015, that number hasn't changed?
Well, the base number
Hasn't
that the
changed?
calculation is
Right.
based on hasn't changed, but there has been an increase.
Yes, sure. But the base value hasn't changed. So in other words, the salaries for elders haven't been reviewed since 2015, like we did last year.
They haven't been reviewed.
They haven't been like challenged or
Right.
whatever since 2015.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I have for now.
Alder Vidiver?
So my question is, and I think I already know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If we were to go to referendum on reducing the council size without changing the budget that was allowed for the council, we would nonetheless also have to go to referendum for the pay to go along with reducing the council size because it is in Unicode. Is that correct?
No, changing the salary does not require referendum. That's just it's not a charter ordinance, the size of the council, it was done by a charter ordinance. So that would have to be changed by referendum, but not the salaries.
So if we had a referendum to change the size of the council and then again kept the budget the same for council pay, then we would just change the ordinance to be able to make the pay allocated across the smaller number of alders.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have last year's ordinance up, just so the committee's aware, the annual salary for alders would have started at $20,604 with an annual adjustment based on the percentage change in the average hourly wage for permanent city employees. And there was also adjustments for the president and vice president. So that was the proposal from last year. And I do not know what the current salary is for alders, but presumably all of you do.
Attorney Haas, a clarifying question there. So I was here in fall, and so I remember the resolution passing for the increased funds,
Right.
but then the ordinance failing. So with the number that you just gave us of $20,604, was that the approved amount for the budgetary consideration?
Right, I believe that's what was included in the budget.
And then that was actually a reduced amount than what was originally proposed and did not pass finance?
I think so. I don't remember the details, but I think that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And just looking at the chart that was attached in Legistar with this item, just reading across, so it'd be hours per week. So without like the breakdown, the presentation, I'm not verbatim, but I know former Alder Foster did a lot of work and was looking at other cities and comparable sizes of councils, but also using evidence-based research to propose different amounts. And so the table that we have here kind of shows on the far left-hand column how folks identify, or maybe like tax purposes, whether they're a single adult, whether they're part of a family unit, whether they have a child. And then looking through May of 2022 with the percentage consideration Attorney Haas was saying is built into the ordinance. Right now, it's $13.77 per hour maybe if I could get somebody to help me understand that first column of 20.81. We go from 20.81 hours to 21. In the table, potential alder pay, attached to the first column. Yes.
So at the time, we did an exercise. He asked others to do an exercise and record, how long did it take you to do the job? So some of that information was kind of shared to calculate, based on that information, calculate how many hours really takes. But I think the ordinance today only goes for 24 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Let me see, I have it.
So even if how many hours is the description of the dollar amount is supposed to be based on? Is it 24 hours a week or something like that?
Go ahead, Karen.
We were consulting here. So the 20.81, I believe, is what the city attorney's office has determined is the average amount of time an alder works. So that's you can speak more to that process, but for insurance purposes, so.
Okay, so, but I think somewhere in an ordinance, it does details how many hours in average was used to calculate that number. And I thought it was 24, but whatever, I'm not sure. Maybe 20.81, that's fine. But
Yeah.
anyhow, so that first column with the 20.81 hours per week, that's what that is. It's just again indicating, like you were saying, Alder Curry, how much the salary will be based on the medium of the city or whatever. So it's just nobody was actually asking to pick a number from this list. It was just the intent of this table is to give you clarity for you to compare what the real world is out there, to put, how much you're getting paid for 20.81 versus 24 hours, doesn't matter. What that salary will be versus what we get paid today, which is $13.77 an hour. So I think people took it last year that we were trying to raise our salaries to $40 an hour, which I don't think first of all, we cannot raise our salaries, so that wasn't the point. This doesn't get into effect until the next people on the next term. But this table is a good visual for you to see how on balance or who can live on $13.77 an hour. So if we want more people to have the opportunity to serve on council, we should give them a wage where they can actually make money doing the work, instead of having to have full-time jobs or multiple part-time jobs and do the city council. So I think the table was just to represent that this job, for some people, it is a full-time job, and people do it as a full-time job, but not everybody's as privileged to have the time or the resources to do that at $13.77 an hour. So,
And if I could just add to that, so my understanding of, where that number came from, because I know many alders work more than 20 hours a week on their alder job, is that our attorney, our office had done, in order to qualify alders for benefits, years ago, our office had done a study to justify that they were working sufficient hours to qualify for benefits under state law. Our office then last year, I believe, tried to update that and collected information, I think, with the council office about the number of committees alders served on, what the average time was for a meeting, committee meetings, and building in time for constituent work. And on average, that was the conclusion. I think our office also offered that in order to get a more detailed picture of that, we would need to get more specific data from individual alders. And there wasn't really an appetite to do that at that time. So this was, the general high-level view. Obviously, some alders put in more and less time, but that is saying 52 weeks a year, on average, 21 hours a week is spent by every alder. So when we have August and there's not as many meetings, we're still saying there's 21 hours a week being spent by every alder on average. obviously there's going to be some variation in that.
So on that point, Mike, for the salary or the save, what is the benefits? So that means that as an elder, I could use the benefits from the health insurance and things like
Right.
that, right?
Right.
I don't know how much that is. I mean, I have my own job and they pay for a big chunk of my insurance. I still pay for a chunk of that. But those $14,904 is enough to pay for insurance for you and your spouse today? I mean, just wondering.
Probably not. I have no idea what the amount
Okay.
is, but, I lost my train of thought.
I mean, my job is like $10,000 I pay every year for my
Yeah.
husband and I, out
Yeah.
of my paycheck. So I'm wondering if the entire salary, then if you needed the benefit, if the
Right.
entire salary goes towards the benefit, you benefit responsibility.
Right. I recall my thought, which was, I mean, the city, unless the ordinance says that this is a full-time job, alders cannot be compelled to work any specific number of hours a week. You're all elected officials, you put in the time that you feel is necessary. But my understanding was the calculation was necessary because of the question of benefits.
Thank you. Alder Evers?
Thank you, President Curry. As I recall the discussion last year, we came up with a number that was equivalent to the lowest paid city employee, the hourly amount that the lowest paid city employee received. And making the case, accepting the 20 some and a fraction of an hour per week as an average, and I don't think we don't need to debate that. Personally, I don't think so. To me, that seemed very logical, that alders should not be expected to work at a rate that's roughly $5 an hour less than what the lowest paid city employee makes on an hourly basis. I still think that is an argument worth making. And I would hope that we can revive that conversation when it comes to the operating budget this year.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Alder Evers.
Just to clarify, I mean, that, as I said, any increase could not go into effect until 2025, so I'm not sure.
Of course, I understand that.
I'm not sure if that would affect the
I got-
budget for next year.
Next. Round.
Yes, no, well, I understand that, but isn't it true that we could put things into motion now, or maybe we don't do this until next year? I guess what you're saying, this would be something we could take up at next year's budget, not this year's budget. I think that's what you're saying. Is that correct?
Correct, but also the ordinance piece could be done at any time. So
Right.
the ordinance could be put in place now, and then the budget, next year's budget would have to accommodate the ordinance.
And perhaps even the mayor would, well, we'll see, could make a change in their operating budget, but it would certainly make it easier if that were the case.
Thank you, Alder Evers. Vice President Figueroa Cole.
So to clarify that last point, again, so the focus for us here should be then to change the ordinance, because if the ordinance is changed, then the mayor has to put that on the budget for that change in the future, like, right? So it's not, they wouldn't be like, we don't have to deal with the budget season, we don't have to do any of that. So the focus will be to really get the ordinance changed for the values as soon as possible, so it will be into effect at that time.
When the mayor puts together the 2025 budget, it would need to be included in that.
Okay, yep. I think that makes it a little bit more, removing the budget component makes it less stressful, and I think maybe people can give it a better thought this way.
Thank you, Vice President. I don't see any other hands or folks in the queue, so I'll just share. I know that obviously this was on the agenda today, focusing on the ordinance. And I know that we don't have all of our members of CCEC right now, and obviously not even half of the council, but would definitely encourage alders to, if they aren't not already documenting kind of their, the hours that are spent during the job. Obviously, right now is a very busy season with budget conversations and deliberations happening. But I know last year when, at least I didn't amplify it forward, but even when I stopped to think about, how much time it takes to respond to a text or an email or a phone call, the assigned committees that we are appointed to by the mayor, let alone attendees or committees that you're attending to get information that will lead into your vote at regarding a item at council, takes a significant amount of time and will be eye-opening. And I know with the upcoming capital and operating budget deliberations and considerations the council will make, wage equity and wage parity has been before us. We hear the nationwide cry for $15 minimum wage living salary, and so want to keep that in mind as we're making decisions for the rest of the city and then budgetary impacts. Also, looking forward to this next cohort that, if we were able to achieve raising alder pay, would ultimately affect, which could include some or none of us. That the ordinance is the important piece to solidify moving forward with this. So, there is not necessarily a recommended action on this, but if there is any desire from committee members to put forward or to direct CCEC of how we would like to move this forward, I would entertain that, but would hope that you would help amplify within our peers the consideration of looking at how much time is spent compared to how much, when you break it down to an hourly rate, we are compensated for our time, so. Not seeing or hearing any others wanting to make points of discussion. I'm gonna take that as okay to move us along. That'll take us to agenda item number 6, legislative file 75427, council office updates, and turn it over to our chief of staff.
Thank you. Pretty brisk one today. Got the upcoming staff out of office. I always like to draw particular attention to if you need to get neighborhood meetings into the office by within our 3-week deadline, to pay attention to the timing of vacations and other out of office. I was happy to see a lot of alders participating in finance, the finance committee capital budget briefings. And so there's another reminder for folks who aren't on finance committee that they will be discussing capital budget amendments on the 26th at 4:30. So I would encourage everyone all of the alders to come to that meeting as well, and to keep checking your inbox for information from Christine Coe on budget. I wanted to flag for everyone's attention that they probably have noticed some communications from IT. There's a few important things happening here that are relevant. So one is that in November, there's going to be a big citywide website update and blog tool update. We received a minor update recently to the blog tool. If you remember, you were retrained on that tool. This will complete that process, and it's going to be citywide. And then also all the websites are getting a new look and more than a new look. I shouldn't just say a new look, but you'll notice some differences there. And so pay attention to the emails sent from IT regarding trainings and refresher trainings and optional trainings for blogs and email lists. And it's a great opportunity as well if you'd like to have a refresher, to grab one of those optional trainings. If you'd like to see the small changes to your blog tool come November, I recommend it. And then they've also been sending emails regarding things like managing inboxes in preparation for migration to M365. So I really recommend that you focus on those emails as well. I know they send kind of a routine update email, but these have more concrete information about some things they're asking us to do with our city inboxes in preparation for that move. So I just wanted to highlight that for you as well. And thank you to everyone who filled out the survey for me about your interest in some trainings and discussions this winter. What I'm going to do now is start collating according to the availability of the alders who are interested in each of the trainings, and then communicate with those subgroups in kind of separately. Of course, everyone will be invited to all of the trainings, but in terms of focusing on availability of the folks who said they were interested. And and then I'm just highlighting some more training opportunities. And I wanted to, in addition to giving and receiving feedback, there is a training on gender inclusive language that will be offered on October 10th if folks want to get some practice and learn the best practices in terms of gender inclusive language. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions, comments? Appreciation. Okay. Not seeing any. I know that that is in our inboxes, and thank you, Karen, for the time. That moves us, into agenda item 7, which is future agenda items. I am blanking. Doesn't go past today though, right? Okay. That's the one in Legistar.
Oh, it's not showing up? Okay. There's an updated version that I sent to the committee this afternoon as well.
Excuse me, I'm looking.
Click on the item.
There we go. I found it.
And also on the item, I put if you click the item number, you should see it. Yeah.
All right, so upcoming that is tagged is for our Alder social media pilot to come back before us next month. A couple other agenda items that I think have been amplified by Alder Rahili regarding performance excellence and ResJ analysis. I know there was a ResJ, some type of meeting that was happening around the same time as this meeting today. And progress update on hybrid BCC meeting possibilities. I would probably like to add, obviously it's been some time, but we did have a council office retreat, an experiential experience with restorative justice. And I would like to bring kind of a report back to the rest of our peers about what was discussed there and how that work can continue, whether or not we were in attendance. I'm trying to think in discussion today if any other points came up. I know that at last council meeting, at least, there was a conversation regarding housing issues, and I know that there are a lot of conversations about where that best fits. Not saying that CCEC wouldn't, but I know that there is a planned presentations coming towards council to kind of give updates regarding work that is already being done, work towards within many policy areas, housing included. I can't think of anything offhand that was discussed here today that may be wanting to amplify to the list. And we'll see if there are any items from members you would like to see addressed. Alder Vitiver.
Well, I intimated this with my prior comment, but I'd like us to consider thinking about reducing the size of council. We have a very large council. It is also an even number, which makes ties feasible. My personal belief is that we should consider a smaller council that is an odd number. And then budgetary constraints would be such that we would wind up having higher pay per person with relatively limited additional work. So, as an idea.
Thank you, Alder Vitiver. We have that down. Vice President Figueroa Cole.
So I just want to ask how, I mean, if people have other ideas, they can always reach out to Karen or you or I or whatever, and we add them. It doesn't have to be on this forum where the ideas are born, right?
Correct.
Because my brain is dead. Yes.
Actually, I am remembering something that having Alder Martinez Rutherford in chambers, a presentation from Madison Police Department in terms of what they're doing with human trafficking.
Human trafficking. Yep. We should add that.
Alder Martinez Rutherford.
Yes, I would also suggest having Kirsten too.
Well, that's a great idea.
I wonder too, not to put you on the spot, Alder Madison, but I know that there's been a lot of collaborative conversations happening in like MMSD. Do you feel like some of the conversations that are starting could be started here in CCEC or, oop, let me turn your mic on, sorry.
I mean, it could be, but I just don't know enough about what MMSD is experiencing. You know, I've only had like very super quick conversations, but I think at minimum adding it to a future agenda since I think we're meeting, I forget what Debbie says, but I know there's a meeting going to come up with Dr. McCray, but it's my guess that it might make sense to add it to a future agenda. And then speaking of that, there was an article that came out in the Cap Times around like the challenging in like street names. And when I first got appointed, I had did the resolution to honor Leslie Watkins, and I talked with someone who's doing some, you know, they're just looking at the history of the street names. But I do want to have, and I don't know if this is the right place to do it, but a conversation about the historical, like some of our street names and like really what our street names are named after. But I can't remember who that staff member is who's doing who is it?
Oh, I think the mayor was working on that.
Oh,
Yeah.
But yeah, just really, or at least just seeing where it's at, like where's the city at? Because the article was very interesting. And I just remember those early discussions I had and wanting to come back and work on that eventually. So yeah, MMSD, street signs.
Thank you. Alder Conklin.
Thank you, President Curry. I just wanted to add, I would like to see everybody from the council staff come in before us. Introductions, what they do. Like, I think there's still missing pieces of who's supposed to do what, who goes to where. And I think if we can get everybody who's in the office in front of us or even at Common Council to just be more aware of who folks are and what they do, I would love to see something with all the council staff together.
Thank you. I will put in a shameless plug. Those of you who are sitting at seats and those of you who will be here later, there is a survey regarding making a connection with holidays, which office staff would all be invited. Not sure if they'd be there, alders and other city staff too. So ability to make connections in a less formal way as well are coming available through social events. So, all right. I think that is a good list that will probably keep growing. Please feel free to amplify anything. And I also see like some intersections with some of the other items that are on here. So for instance, like the ResJ analysis and what goes into that. Is there intersection with our street naming process, et cetera, et cetera? You know, how could CARES and human trafficking and other nonprofit organizations work together under the city's 7 elements of a great city or performance excellence? So good stuff, y'all. All right. Well, that takes us to the end of our agenda. I would
To adjourn.
have a motion to adjourn, Vice President Figueroa.
Second.
And a second. I will assume unanimous consent and consider today's CCC adjourned. Thank you, y'all.